ladies and gentlemen, I'm Krishna C. Nadella, and this is State of Mind on the road at Penn State University. We're back at the One Button Studios here in the Tombros-McWhirter Knowledge Commons, and I'm joined with Joseph A. Fennewald, who is the head of the Knowledge Commons here at Penn State Libraries. Joe, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Krishna.
We're going to continue on our conversation of University Libraries, but more so with respect to what's going on here at Penn State University. But I want to start off with a quote I was able to find recently that says, "It is understood that the academic library shift from a repository of collections to a catalyst for discovery and creation is now happening across the globe. More than ever, libraries are essential as the place where people, knowledge, and research intersect to tackle our world's greatest challenges." Now, Joe, you've spent almost 2 decades in the library systems here within Penn State University. Talk to me about the evolution you've seen at that time.
Yeah, and it really has been amazing to see the changes that has been taking place in academic libraries. 2 decades ago, the emphasis has been on our collections and building those collections, and a lot of emphasis was placed on the materials that the library owned and would make available to its users. And we used a lot of technology to make that readily available to them. So the online catalog not only gave you the record of the book, but it eventually gave you the complete journal, gave you the complete book,
Right.
and we moved in that direction. The last few years, what we've been seeing is that the library is more than just this depository of items and things, but actually a place for students to go and congregate and learn by engaging in conversation, engaging in discussions with one another, with their faculty, with visitors, and with a whole host of other people.
Right.
So we've moved from that shift from our collections to creating a space and to providing them the tools and the resources and the environment for learning to happen. So it's become a much more learning space than I think it has been in the past. It's not just coming here to this space and retrieving the things that we own,
Right.
but actually taking advantage of the space itself.
Interesting. So it's almost a shift in dynamic where before it served a purpose, now it's actually the purpose itself is the library.
Right.
In some ways, that's very revolutionary. I've picked up on the numbers, and they're quite staggering. With an estimated 89% of today's college students using smartphones in addition to laptops and other products such as tablets, how are libraries offering learning opportunities across these mediums locally and globally?
Well, interesting. I mean, one of the things that we have become very sensitive to is that the materials that we are now making available through the computer, it can be accessible in various formats so that it can be read on your iPhone on a small device versus your desktop. And so not only is it that record, but that record of the book, but it
Right.
could actually be the book, or it could be the journal articles and a number of resources that way. But then again, Krishna, that ends up being the focus is on the collection.
Right.
And increasingly, we're trying to focus more and more on the services that
Right.
we have offer and the expertise that we have. And one of the things that students have access to at Penn State is this very wide range of expert librarians. There's librarians here in all sorts of fields, from the business librarians to the librarian in engineering. Many of them have a second master's in that subject specialty.
Really?
And then they can be accessible by that iPhone, by that laptop,
Right.
either through email or through a chat service. We offer an online service that we try to have accessible 24 hours a day for students to be able to go into ask and just be able to go into a chat room.
So if I
Ask
understand
for
this
help.
correctly, I could be an international student from India who's enrolled here at Penn State. I go
Right.
home for the holidays, and I can still access a librarian here from Penn State University.
You'll still be able to access the librarian, yes.
That's amazing.
And in fact, we will have students who are studying abroad and contacting us and saying, I'm having trouble finding this article,
Really?
I have an author, I think the title, and how can you help me?
Right.
And we can make that available to them.
That's amazing. So let's talk about what Penn State's doing, because I think some of these things Joe Q. Public would not know about. First of all, talk to me about the impetus for the Knowledge Commons. It was not here when I was a student.
Right.
Truthfully, I was blown away when I had the tour before the show today. This is completely not what I think of when I think of a traditional library. So help us understand, help the viewers understand what it's all about.
Well, it's an incredible space, and it's been very well received by our students, and it really is that emphasis on the space is a place for learning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also a space that we wanted for students to actually be part of that learning process and part of that creativity.
Right.
So there's things that we put into the Knowledge Commons with the idea that you would be able to create something. So it may be the paper, the traditional research paper,
Right.
but now we have recording studios that they can create a blog,
Right.
They can do some type of audio recording, as well as this wonderful one-button studio.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
and the emphasis here is being able to provide students with the technology without them having to know the technology. So
Right.
when you walk into the one-button studio, all you need to do is have a thumb drive with you, and that basically activates everything in the room. So it turns on the camera, the
everything.
lights, the
That's
microphone,
amazing.
and they just kind of position themselves where they want to be in the studio, and they'll be able to record themselves giving a speech. They walk away with something, you
Really?
know,
Yeah.
and that's different than what libraries had done before. Now we're giving them a recording of giving this speech, and then they can take it and they can listen to themselves. I'm sure you find that in these recordings that you sometimes look back and you see what you've done.
Oh, sure.
And you wonder,
sometimes the hardest thing to do.
and that's what we're providing the students here,
Yeah.
is this opportunity for them to walk over, plug this device, their thumb drive, into any computer, and then they'll be able to record themselves.
Right.
So we took the traditional library, but we created that space. We moved some collections off-site, and we created a space where we can bring these multiple services into one space.
Sure.
We really looked at the social needs of students today, so
Right.
we went from something that was basically operating during the day and early evenings to something that operated 24 hours most days of the week.
Right.
24/5. We open at 10 a.m. on Sunday. We stay open until midnight on Friday.
Wow.
And then 10 a.m. to midnight on Saturday.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So just for our viewers, to let you know, we are actually utilizing the One Button Studios technology as we speak. To Joe's point, we have a flash drive that's inserted, and we are taping, and that will be our conduit to be able to take the show, the raw footage, and be able to edit it. So it's happening as we speak. State of Mind is happy to be able to use the One Button technology. Now, with that said, I'd be interested to know, with regards to technology in general, we all know there's a lifespan to technology. I hate to say this, when I went to Penn State, the iPod was really in at the time, and now the iPod's just baked into the iPhone. So you've obviously been able to address the needs of the students that are currently here on campus, and the technology here is state of the art. How do you ensure that you continue to stay ahead of the curve, so that way the technology doesn't become out of date, and most importantly, the students that are coming in and enrolling in are ready for the future and ready for what's ahead of them?
That's a really big challenge, and I think that this is where we really are open to people on campus who are skilled, who see the library as approachable to opening up to new ideas. One of the things that we're doing that will soon open here in the Knowledge Commons is our 3D printing lab. We're looking at other type of new technology that is there, that is helping students kind of think in new and different ways,
Right.
to be creative.
Sure.
But in regards to your question about also anticipating the future, looking at how people will need the information they need, and what
Right.
resources, not only the resources, but the services, and how can we move ourselves from just that chat room to making ourselves even more accessible to our students and our users, and not being bound by a physical building.
Right.
You know, and I think that's really kind of the future with libraries, is seeing how best students can utilize the space that we're providing, but also realizing that the services we're providing and the resources we're providing is not going to be bound by the building we're in.
Got it. So to that point, and I think it'd be very interesting for those students who are looking at the world in a very different way than maybe I did when I was at their age. Libraries still, for many of us, are physical buildings. And these buildings are sometimes the most stalwart aspect of any campus location. They're the center, they're the beacon. We had talked before taping about the third space, so to speak. How do you make sure the library in itself stays, intact and with the times? We talked about technology for the students. What about, making sure the building itself, the architectural standpoint, stays relevant as well?
Well, it's again, another challenge. You're giving me a lot of challenges, Krishna. But I think it has to do with kind of the flexibility in looking at the spaces.
Right.
So when you walk through the Knowledge Commons and saw the space that we created, I don't know if you were aware, but you were on a raised floor. And the idea behind the raised floor was the fact that we would be able to move wiring around very easily, and we wouldn't have to worry about the structure. You're in an old building.
Right.
So, you know, there's not a whole lot we can do with the physical structure of the building, but there's things that we can do on the inside to provide us that flexibility as we move forward. All the walls in the Knowledge Commons are non-weight bearing walls.
Really?
They can be broken down and reconfigured without much effort. Okay?
That is fascinating.
And so the whole space can be, we can look at what we thought of doing. We can continue to assess how we're doing, and then we can look at what's not working or what do we need to change in the future without going into a big building project that we had done when we created the Knowledge Commons.
That sounds very reminiscent of some of these more forward-thinking companies like Google, Apple, Bloomberg, where they don't have walls that stay, that are weight-bearing, as you said. Everything's transparent. Okay. You can move things around. Someone who's worked in the financial industry, the Knowledge Commons looks very much like a trading floor. There are no offices. Everyone's there to mingle, and there's an energy that's created. It's very interesting because I think that type of environment really lends itself for students as they enter the real world. But there's also an excitement, I have to imagine. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Knowledge Commons opened in 2012.
2012, yeah.
And so, from the metrics I've read, the Penn State libraries have had 2 million visitors?
Yeah, we're coming up to over 2 million visitors coming through.
Since that time,
each year.
Each year?
Each year.
Oh my gosh.
Now a lot of our visitors might be repeating visitors.
Right.
But one of the more interesting, so as the head of the Knowledge Commons, one of my key functions is to look at how are the services we're providing meeting the needs of students, but also kind of get a sense as to assessing the space itself and how is it popular, are students using it. And outside of my office, for instance, there are 60 computers, just 60. There's 500 in the building, but there's 60 outside my office. And I could track the number of logins for those computers and how many times the student sits down and how long they're sitting at the computer in this kind of aggregate data. I'm not counting you sitting at the computer, but just number of students. And I can tell you that in a given semester, a third of all Penn State students will sit in the Knowledge Commons.
Really?
And you've been here. A third of all students. 15,000 students.
That's amazing.
Will sit in the Knowledge Commons at some point during the course of the semester.
That's amazing.
And they will vary. Sometimes will come in just to print out that paper.
Yeah.
But I've had students here for 5 and 6 hours at a time. I've had students here all day long because of the environment and that kind of sense that if I'm here, I can get things done.
Got it. Oh, wow, that's very powerful information. I think that probably will set you up for the second half of the decade. So to that point, what trends are you seeing in the world of libraries going into the second half of this decade that you're on the lookout for?
We definitely are moving from looking at our collections, the physical collections, and questioning whether we need to devote the amount of space that we have. And in doing that, in freeing ourselves up from being bound to our physical book, we're looking at how to best utilize the space. And one of the things that we find with students is that how a student study and how varies, not only by students, but even by yourself, that there may be one class that you really need to have a group of you together to work on a project or an assignment, but then there's other classes that you need more private times. So the key with the future of the library, for the academic library, is to really look at the space and be flexible and realize that not only flexible in being able to change the space that you create, but also look at the flexibility in the building itself. And so do we make sure that we provide that quiet contemplative space that some students will need for a particular time, as well as a space like the Knowledge Commons where students are encouraged and invited to really work together in small groups or large groups, and we're providing those study rooms and we're providing much larger work surfaces for them to be able to get that work done.
Excellent. Well, Joe, thank you so much for the insight today.
Appreciate
and thank you for letting us tape in this wonderful studio at One Buttons. That'll wrap up our show for today. If you like what you saw, please like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and subscribe to us on YouTube. If you'd like to catch up on all the previous episodes of State of Mind, check us out on our website. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for the time, and remember, every life is a book. Make yours a bestseller. Have a good night.